The Bahamas National Trust operates some 32 parks around the Bahamas, 4 of them specifically here in New Providence. On any given day, some 90 staff members are responsible for keeping those parks operational for the public to enjoy. Hello and welcome to this edition of On the Record. I'm your host, Jerome Sawyer. In this special episode, we're going to visit some of the parks here in New Providence and attempt to show you the work of the National Trust on a daily basis as they help to preserve and protect our environment and teach anyone who's interested all about this wonderfulness all around us. Stay with us. Our show is going to get started right after this break. Hidden in southwest New Providence is primeval forest, one of the richest displays of our landscape and topography. From the moment you set foot inside, you are lost in a maze of trails of flora and fauna. It's one of 4 parks the Bahamas National Trust curates in New Providence. The name Primeval is a depiction of both the history and mystery that awaits.
Is there lots of light or is there a little bit? A little bit of light. Why? Because of the trees. That's right. Did you know that's also an adaptation? That the taller trees get most of the sunlight. But if you look at the
Education Officer Tika Penn is an expert in these guided tours. During the summer, she conducts regular educational experiences for kids.
To get us a little bit closer to appreciating nature, to finding the wonder and the beauty, even though it might look a little bit different, or it might be uncomfortable or different from what we see in our everyday life.
Is this designed to begin to change behavior in some way?
We are stewards. We are Bahamians. We are people who love what we see and treasure that. Now that's a big mental shift. That's a big mindset shift. But it starts from today.
Even for the most adventurous kid, it takes a bit of bravery. The forest is filled with inhabitants, many unseen to the untrained eye.
This is the time to teach them about the beauty and the wonder in nature. Maybe it's listening for a bird call. Maybe it's watching a flower. Maybe it's seeing the painting in the sky. But all of these positive interactions and connections with nature help to make for a steward.
Yeah. What are the things about this particular park that stand out and that really help to make that connection?
I love the primeval forest because it's like taking a step back in time. We get to come into a very amazing space that seems untouched by development. However, when you go in, you can see these sinkholes. You can see these maybe 2nd, 3rd generation trees that maybe the Lucayans would have looked up at. And we get to see what a forest could really have the potential to do, what green spaces could really happen here in the Bahamas. So as we develop, we talk about sustainable development. As we develop, if we have places like this, treasures like this, we can say, okay, how about we develop with the future in mind? What would these forests look like? What would our environment look like if we had places like this?
It's one of the reasons the Bahamas National Trust really fights so hard to conserve these spaces. From sinkholes to indigenous trails and native trees not normally seen. Described as an outdoor classroom, Tika is a teacher and protector.
To think about me just playing a small role in impacting the next generation. It was a mentor of mine that got up on a stage and jumped up and down, and she said, "It's your future. It's your Bahamas. It's your national treasures. What are you going to do about it? Will your grandchildren only see conch in a book? Will they only hear about these uids and these amazing places from history? Or will they hear about it because you took a stand?" And that changed and revolutionized my life.
Primeval is a place of many adventures. You get to touch and feel so much. In my case, it was the nerve-wracking experience of the resident snake that changed me.
Meet with your friend. Ella, don't be afraid. Again, she's our
favorite was camouflage rat.
After watching this group of kids bravely embrace that snake experience, it was time for me to face into a lifelong fear. I just want to say that within the entire span of my career, I've never been more nervous to do an interview. This is Ella?
Yes.
Okay, so tell me a little bit about this experience that people have here with Ella.
So you wouldn't be surprised that a lot of Bahamians that come and do this snake experience with us have the same reaction you have.
Really?
Yes, we
Okay.
have the same reaction you have, so don't worry. These guys are very docile animals, and that's what I try to show the Bahamian populace. The way I'm handling her, you can see that she's very relaxed in my hand. These guys emit a loud hissing sound when they're upset, so unless you hear some noise, you're pretty good.
Okay.
Another trait that these guys have to know that they're being uncomfortable is they will musk, okay? It comes from right here. It's called the cloaca. This is basically the butt of the snake. It's that scale right there where she's trying to cover up, understandably. Yeah.
So what are some of the biggest misconceptions that people have about Ella and this species?
So a lot of misconceptions they have is that these guys are venomous, which is not the case. This is a constrictor, and her main way of getting her food is stalking it, striking quickly, and then squeezing it. There's no venom involved.
I'm not food. Sorry.
Now they also fear getting bite from a snake. Now, getting bite from anything is gonna hurt, and these guys, I can tell you once again, are very docile. Biting is their last resort. They have 20 small teeth inside of their mouth, too small to make any type of lasting damage on the human body. You could say you'll get a paper cut if you were to get bite from one of these Bahamian boas.
I can't say that I was any less frightened at this point, but at least not so afraid. I continued to probe, hoping to learn more about these often reviled creatures. How do you begin to even change that behavior and get people to understand that snakes are just sort of in their own environment and should be really left alone?
So the way I try to go about changing that is just letting the person experience the boa themselves. They'll see it for themselves that these guys aren't really any threat to them. These guys are also very important to our ecosystem because they help keep the rat population in check. So what I normally tell people is if you like rats, kill the snakes. If you don't like rats, just leave them alone. They'll hang around your yard for a bit, and that's only because rats are in the area. Once they're done with the rats, they'll move on to where they can get some more.
And now, the moment of truth.
There we go. So one hand is gonna come right here. I'm gonna turn around for a bit.
Yeah.
I'm gonna turn around for a bit. Sorry. One hand right here.
Okay.
I'll come on that side where the head is at.
Wait. All right.
Okay, I'll give you the tail first.
Yeah. Good.
There you go. One hand there. Next hand right there underneath
Here?
the stomach. Yep,
Okay.
that's fine.
Okay. This
There
is
you
good.
go.
Hi. Okay.
And I have her right here.
Okay.
you're good.
She's curling. Okay.
So what you're gonna do is just keep your hands just open up a bit,
Uh-huh.
so she can just move through your hand. All right. There you
That's a
go.
lot. Okay. All right. Thank you.
But the best, or worse, was still to come.
One more before you go. Just lean forward a bit. Don't worry. I have the head. I have the head. Just lean forward a bit. Put this head around me. And there you go.
I close my eyes.
One hand is just gonna come right here. Just to hold that. You're good.
Okay.
There we go.
Okay.
Experience of a lifetime. You're
yeah.
fine. You're fine. I'm watching her.
I do not get paid enough for this.
Okay. So this hand, you're just gonna let this go.
Uh-huh.
And you're gonna put her right here in this hand, okay?
She's
So you're
laughing.
fine. You're fine. You're fine. Just don't squeeze there. Right there.
Uh-huh. Okay. Ah!
No, you're fine. You're fine.
Okay.
You're fine. You're
Okay.
fine. You're good. You're good. You're good.
Uh-huh. Okay. All right.
All right. Thank you. There we go. How was it? Now, let me let you breathe first.
Okay. I get it. Yeah. No, I could. Yeah.
So the whole time she hasn't tried to even touch your face, lick you, no sign of aggression at all. She didn't hiss. You don't smell any musk. So, I think she likes you.
Okay, yeah.
Definitely not what you'd call a snake charmer. The experience, though, gave me an appreciation for the notion of coexisting, even if I'm not what you would call a fan. Well, when we come back, we descend into the remnants of an ancient lagoon.
And so imagine that it is 80,000 years ago,
Nice.
and what it would have been like.
Hello and welcome back to On the Record. I'm your host, Jerome Sawyer. We are literally on the journey of a lifetime. We are visiting national parks throughout the Bahamas, and today we're in the primeval forest in southern New Providence. We're going to test everything you think you know about the environment. Come on, let's go.
It's now time to try my hand on another national park adventure, a nature trail hike down into a sinkhole or cave. My guide, Chantel Curtis, is trusted with this next adventure.
Tell us exactly where we are and where are we going.
Okay, so we are in the Primeval Forest National Park. This is one of 4 national parks on the island of New Providence, managed by the Bahamas National Trust. And the Primeval Forest actually is a glimpse into the geological history of the Bahamas. So right now we are about to enter a space called the Marine Fossil Grotto, which is like a lagoon. And so it used to be a lagoon. And so where we started at the visitor center used to be a prehistoric sand dune. So imagine, or just think back of the walk here. We actually started to, you notice that the trail actually slopes. So we are now descending into the lagoon area.
Inside the lagoon, the rocks tell the story of waves and marine life that once called this spot home. There's also the mystery of the embedded conch shell I'm tasked with finding.
So this is literally a spiral staircase. It's taking us all the way down.
Yes, we wanted people to be able to access this wonderful feature within the park. And so we had to design something that would allow us to safely descend into this space.
So this was a lagoon
This was a lagoon.
of water.
Yes, yes.
Wow.
And if you look on the rocks, you can see, what do you notice? Well, actually, you tell me what you see on some of the rocks around you.
I completely failed biology. No, but you get the sense that this is where water was held for a long time. You can tell by the smoothness of the rocks. I think my biology teacher would be so disappointed at this.
It's not smooth.
Oh, it's not smooth?
Yes.
I just failed that. Okay,
No,
go
but
ahead.
it's completely fine.
Okay,
It's
it
completely
looks
fine.
like...
This is a learning experience.
Yeah,
Yes.
it looks like things I've seen underwater or in places that hold water. So
Yes.
for me, I can immediately recognize that obviously water settled here for a while.
Yes, yes, for sure. And so we do have some interpretive signage that can kind of provide a guide for visitors when they do come on here to explain kind of what are some of the features that you can see within the rock itself, and then helps you be able to identify and understand more about what some of these ancient creatures are.
So the first question I have is what happened to the water?
So what happened to the water? And so whenever we do, like if you look in geological time, we did have times where sea level rose, where sea level was very high, but then as things change, at times, at a certain point in time, the levels receded. And so once it receded, we have these wonderful features that we call sinkholes or karst features that are throughout the park. And so as sea levels rose, as the ceiling, the top of the cavern collapsed, it exposed these sinkholes that you will see throughout the park.
Like so many of the visitors who come here, I was awestruck by the experience. I was even more amazed to learn that this 7.5-acre park has about 19 sinkholes per acre.
This is definitely a safe way that people are able to descend into this space to kind of get a feel of what it's like to be below the surface essentially, and then observe some of the geological features that would exist in this environment. And it also provides, an opportunity for people to, take note of some of the plants, some of the animals that you would see in here. Like for instance, you did note the orb weaver spider that's in here. We do have Bahamian boas that are in here. We do have tree frogs. So there's a a variety of life that does exist and thrive in this environment.
The cave also opens up into a crawl space. We first observed the hole from above on the way down. Again, a fear of small spaces could be challenging.
So literally I can crawl in this space?
Literally you can crawl.
Okay.
Think about limbo.
All right.
Or Luda's how low can you go? You know, whichever one is more feasible for you.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
This is amazing.
it is.
Wow.
So it gives you a really different experience from walking on the trail. Now you're actually below the trail, you're below the tree line, you're in a karst environment. And so imagine that it is 80,000 years ago
Nice.
and what it would have been like.
I think for the average Bahamian, for the average Nasuvian, like myself, we have no idea that something like this exists and that we can come and visit it.
And that's why we protected this space. And so one of our former past presidents of the BNT, Mr. Pericles Melis, he was actually very instrumental in getting this environment protected. He discovered this place kind of like by accident during hunting back in the 1960s. And from since then, he was a strong advocate for getting this environment protected. And so in 2002, it officially became a national park, and it opened to the public in 2014 once we put in some infrastructure that allowed people to safely walk the trails and view a lot of these features.
Safely back on the outside, it was now time to find the conch.
So I'm just gonna give you one hint.
Right.
It's not in an obvious position. So
Okay, so it's not in front of me.
it's correct. I'm glad that you really grasped that hint right there. Oh, you're getting a little cold. You're getting hot again. Getting hot, 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 hot.
Wait. Is it here?
Oh, look at that.
This
Way
is
to
it here.
go. Give
There you
yourself
go.
a round of applause. Good stuff. Yes, you did well.
And there, embedded deep into the rocks, a fossilized conch shell, estimated to have been there over 85,000 years.
No,
That's an old conch.
that's an old conch, yes.
Wow.
Every experience, every tour, every employee comes with a cost. They must all be curated and maintained. The cost of this and other parks comes with a hefty price tag.
There's infrastructure in some of these parks, as you can see, interpretive signage. There are trails, there's trees that are marked, there's welcome centers, there's restrooms. All of these, as you can imagine, requires not just a dynamic team of talented Bahamians to run this organization and this park, but of course funds necessary to keep it open, to keep it fueled, to keep it accessible to the Bahamian public and to our visitors who love to experience a national park.
How challenging is it for you to raise that money that's necessary each year?
We do rely on multiple ways to sort of fuel our revenue throughout the year. We're operating on about an $8.5 million budget annually right now. Majority of that coming in from funded projects or grants. We're working with other nonprofit organizations, international institutions to really make this work happen. Our grant portfolio is about 32 huge multi-year projects. We're also reliant on our membership program, so every Bahamian should be a member of the Bahamas National Trust. Comes with lots of perks like free membership into parks. Whenever we have these great fundraising events during the Fall Festival, which is another way in which we gain revenue, we invite the public to join us.
To be able to effectively manage all 32, we need about 250 staff. Right now we're about 85 to 90 staff strong, but we recognize that although we are a small staffed organization, being able to provide the necessary maintenance for the parks has been challenging because of the financial requirements. And so we have to be very strategic in our operating hours because we want to make sure that the parks do provide the visitor services that it offers to not only Bahamians but to all of the guests, visitors to the country. So it's been challenging with finding sufficient staff to be able to cover our operational needs for maintenance, for upkeep, for guided tours, for that true experience of being able to appreciate these particular protected areas and the spaces that they offer.
Wine and art, jollification, festival, Noel. Just some of the many BNT fundraisers helping to keep this organization going, while some parks generate user fees from entries and specialty marine parks.
We are just beneath the branches and leaves of the mighty mahogany, the last of its kind from a colonial era of years bygone. You know, just reading that signage behind us and looking at that tree and making that connection, that took me to a whole different place. How do we get Bahamians to get here, to appreciate this, and to be able to help you all to do more of what you do and to preserve
And this is why national parks exist. This is why conservation is so important, to protect species like this and all of the biodiversity that relies on this ecosystem. It is unique. This is an interesting park in that it was a private donation of land in which we converted into a national park. And so that's just one example of the way in which people want to give back. They want to be able to contribute. They want to make this accessible for generations, to not just preserve this for nature, but to educate all of the children that come through here, all of the Bahamians, all of the visitors that need to experience something as precious as the mighty mahogany. So coming into our national parks, you're going to meet our team. You're going to become inspired by what they're telling you. They're welcoming you to these spaces. Hopefully they'll give you some information about our membership program, which is another step up. You visited a park, you've been inspired, you want to see more. So become a BNT member as little as $20, $30, $50 and up for an annual membership. It really gives you access to all of these beautiful spaces, access to some of those events on members only nights. There's exclusive shopping discounts around town. There's tons of perks of membership, but truly just being able to give to an organization on an annual basis is a gift.
The adventure here on The Record continues as the team heads on over to Bonefish Pond in an attempt at some snorkeling and kayaking.
Oh, yeah.
This is your first time?
Yeah.
Nestled in South New Providence, Bonefish Pond is an incredible example of the diversity of the Bahamas National Trust park system. A winding boardwalk allows you to experience the system of protective mangroves. But to get a deeper appreciation for this natural wonder, a guided kayaking tour is a definite. While getting started could be a little challenging, especially for a television crew who are clearly not experienced in the outdoors.
Yep. Yeah, so sit right here and then swing your legs around. Professional. Olympic. There you go.
Well, finally, we get underway with our guide, Elijah Sands. Or so I think.
Kayaking is always, it's new for a lot of people.
Right.
I've taken hundreds, if not, hundreds of people kayaking in this specific national park.
Right.
And it's always a very brand new experience for them. They're always, like, I didn't know this existed. I mean, look around this. It doesn't look like you're in Nassau or something.
No.
And this is also like the perfect place to introduce people to kayaking.
Okay.
Because the water is not too deep. It's pretty shallow.
Don't worry about me. I'm turning around.
Okay, let me get a little closer.
Go ahead.
Admittedly, it was a big challenge.
It's a really incredible mangrove ecosystem. It's actually one of the last remaining places on the island where you can still experience it. Okay.
And they say 3 times the charm.
This is like the perfect place to introduce people to mangroves. This national park is one of the last remaining intact mangrove systems on the island. We're actually going with the current right now, so we don't have to paddle too much, which is a good thing.
Okay.
So once you like come in the right tide, it's actually a really like interesting place and a really nice place to get people into this hobby. Not a lot of Bahamians go kayaking because they don't even know that it's something that they could do. You know, in the holidays, people are very used to going to the beach,
Right.
very used to just, you know, doing holiday stuff, but visiting national parks is not something the average Bahamian would think
I
about.
want to talk a little bit
for a
about
holiday.
these mangroves and what it is that we're seeing right now as we are kayaking through.
Okay, so yeah, right now we're in the Bonefish Pond National Park, which is a tidal mangrove ecosystem. This national park is 1,250 acres, and the majority of it is this mangrove ecosystem. Mangroves are one of the most important ecosystems on the planet, and especially important to us in the Bahamas. You know, we depend heavily on mangroves for food. You know, most of the animals, most of the fish we love to eat, groupers, crawfish, conch, all these things grow up in the mangrove ecosystems. Even other organisms that are important to our culture and economy, such as sharks, turtles, stingrays, you know, all the things that tourists come to see, also grow up in mangroves. And apart from providing, you know, home and habitat for so many animals, they also help protect our coastlines. So mangroves are one of the best natural defenses we have against things like hurricanes and tropical storms. You can see that they're right on the coast. And if you look at these red mangroves specifically, you can see they're very big, complex prop roots that do a really good job of breaking down storm surge and powerful waves during hurricanes. And of course, one more thing I'd like to add is, you know, as we internationally and nationally start to talk about climate change, mangroves are essentially climate change superheroes. So they absorb large amounts of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and store it into their roots and into the ground. So they're like incredible carbon sinks. So they play so many incredible roles. They provide so many benefits to both people and the environment.
What are some of the threats to these mangroves?
So mangroves are still under a lot of threats globally and also in here in the Bahamas. One of the greatest threats to mangroves is unsustainable coastal development.
That excavation project first caught our eye when we arrived. Payloaders are removing large amounts of fill daily. The result? Sediments streaming into the pond. It's all completely legal, we understand, as they have the requisite permits that have been issued, but it's clearly affecting the nearby aquatic environment.
We are in constant discussions with the Ministry of Environment and the Department of Environmental Protection and Planning about that project. We do understand that they do have the appropriate permits to operate that project. However, we are still concerned and are still monitoring the potential effects it's having on the national park. Like I mentioned specifically, and as we saw this morning, you know, when we arrived, there was silt all in the water. I know, and silt could pose a challenge to the mangroves and the ecosystem.
Later, we'll give you the underwater view of just how this silt is streaming into the park. But it raises questions about development versus conservation.
So we understand you need to crack a balance between conservation, preservation, and development and the needs of a country. And I like to use the word conservation more than preservation, because preservation is protecting something and leaving it as it is forever. You know, that's not a very realistic scenario for a lot of things in the Bahamas. We just want to conserve things. So, you know, tourism is a big thing to the Bahamas. And, you know, a lot of major tourism comes with a lot of major developments. So, you know, our role and how we seek to balance that at the BNT is by protecting these spaces, these national parks, by setting these areas aside and by managing them and enhancing them sustainably. We are making sure that these areas will always remain for the benefit of the people in the Bahamas. So, you know, developments can happen all along the coast, but if we have national parks, set national parks that are protected forever, we can ensure that these parks are almost like insurance policies.
We were created by government. We receive an annual subvention from government that provides about 25% of our budget. And so we've not always been, you know, best partners. I mean, we've not always had the best relationship with government. However, over time, we have found a way to work together. And so I would say it's a positive relationship. We've been working with a number of government entities, providing training opportunities. At the end of the day, we are looking at the same goal. We are moving forward with developing strategies and implementing them to manage the natural resources of the Bahamas.
Wanting to give my tired arms a rest, we ventured out of the kayaks, ankle deep in the terrain. Bonefish Pond is a place to learn about the marine species that reside here. How do you work along with the government to protect and maintain these parks and these experiences?
So the government of the Bahamas is one of the biggest partners of the Bahamas National Trust. The government provides about $1.5 million annually to the BNT through its subvention. And these areas, again, the areas that were mandated and set aside by the government for the BNT to manage. So the BNT identifies national parks in partnership with the community and, using science, etc., to identify areas that need protection. And then we immediately work with local communities and the government of the Bahamas to set aside these areas. The government has committed to supporting the BNT, especially with developing infrastructure. As you can see, as expansive as this park is, you can only get to this portion if you got on a kayak. So, for national parks across the Bahamas, we're partnering with the government and private funders and donors to develop more infrastructure to allow people to be able to access these recreational spaces more effectively.
The BNT also works with communities nearby to protect those areas in and around them.
And so we want to be able to build those relationships at the community level throughout the communities where we operate. And so we're talking about 10 islands and counting. And so we want to make sure that we have the community in mind when we make decisions on the regulations that governs the national parks. We want to make sure that their input is heard and is also a part of the factors and how we put these systems in place.
I look behind us and there are homes and people are building, and so how is that relationship? Because obviously this is protected area, but people are building, they own property, and they're right at your doorstep.
Right, so it's no coincidence that national parks protect some of the most beautiful places in the country, and everybody wants to live next to something that is pretty. And so for a lot of national parks around the Bahamas, there's always a component of historical use. There's always, communities that have lived in these areas or have used these areas. And there's also people who have homes or have property that they eventually will build homes on. So in the case of the Bonefish Pond National Park, you could look around and you could just see these random houses that they just kind of pop up out of nowhere. So these are specifically a lot of farmers. Cowpen Road is an area that's very popular for farming. It's, set aside for that sort of use. And so anytime we designate an area or we, work to manage an area, we work really closely with local communities to identify some of the threats to the areas, and make sure that, the practices and, the way they live benefits the national park. And you have these houses and developments this close to these protected areas. There's always, of course, risk of pollution, encroachment, that sort of stuff. So neighboring communities are one of the most important stakeholders to any national park the BNT manages in the Bahamas.
As most people come to this, what do they leave with? What do they take away with them after coming to this experience?
Right. So, just how you just mentioned, you thought you've seen it all, and then you was able to kayak for an additional 15, 20 minutes and still see that now you're completely surrounded by mangroves. I think kind of everybody leaves with a sense of just greater understanding and awareness and also appreciation, not just for this space specifically, but for the ecosystem itself, which is the mangroves, and also our work. Because, as we were coming along, there's a little race going on, but, there's always opportunity, as you kayak through, to talk about conservation, talk about mangroves, and talk about the work of the BNT.
Described as super nurseries, these mangroves are breeding grounds and early habitats for all kinds of species.
The place is connected to the ocean. You never know what you can see. I've been coming here since I was about 12 years old. I've always lived in this area. And then I went to Anatole Rogers, which is right over there. So this was essentially kind of in my backyard. So I've been coming here through the years to experience a bunch of different things. And I've seen the common snappers and fish. I've also seen things like a lot of sharks. So Bonefish Pond National Park is...
Sharks, right?
Yeah. But the friendly kind, So in the summertime, nurse sharks, which everybody know to be docile and kind of calm, the ones that people pet all over the place. This is actually a breeding ground for nurse sharks. So in the summer, specifically every 2 years, which just goes with their reproduction cycle, if you come to Bonefish Pond, you'll see a lot of nurse sharks. On any given day, you'll see about 7 or 8 of them in the mangrove creeks because they come here to reproduce. And for the first time this year, actually, I've also observed baby lemon sharks, like really, really tiny ones that I was able to verify were about a few days old. So we also could kind of start to guesstimate that this area might also be important pupping ground for species like lemon sharks. But I've also seen eagle rays, really big ones, a lot of stingrays, an incredible amount of turtles out here as well. I've seen a manatee out here once as well. So anything, it's connected to the ocean. Anything that wants to come in and say hi will come in and say hi. So you shouldn't be afraid of that. The only real threats out here is just watch where you step. As we are standing in this hydric soil, this essentially mud, maybe some sharp rocks and sharp things. There are some jellyfish, but they don't really sting that often, upside down jellyfish. But if they're irritated, they can release stinging cells. But keep your hands to yourself, keep your toes to yourself, and you'll be perfectly fine.
Good, I think that's a good time for us.
Well, having survived that kayaking adventure, it's now time to really get wet. When we come back, Under the Sea, a look at what's living beneath the surface. Back at Bonefish Pond, Senior Science Officer Lindy Knowles spends much of his time with the Trust beneath the surface, watching all the changes in the park's aquatic environment.
So most of the fish and anything that we consume tends to come and spend their early stages of life inside the mangroves. So anything that you want to eat pretty much comes from here, from the marine environment. And the Bahamas, we do love a fish. And so when we developed Nassau, as Nassau continued to expand in its urban limits, we've cut down most of the mangroves that we have on the island. And those that remain, we've cut apart, put roads through it so they're not functioning as they should. So when you have a place like Bonefish Pond, which is one of the last intact systems, you want to make sure that it's constantly preserved and constantly protected so that the people that fish around Nassau or eat fish from around Nassau have an opportunity to continue to do that, as well as make sure that we have our reefs well protected, and so that it ain't just all about the eating, it's all about the protecting as well.
The majority of what he sees down here is affected by human surface activities.
As I said, Nassau's urbanization is coming in. As climate change starts to really affect us, we have we have homes right to the edge of the park. And so what happens when tides start to really rise and the mangroves need a place to go? Eventually they'll drown. And so that's a major long-term threat.
In-park fishing, dredging, construction and development are all real threats. Remember that nearby dredging we spoke of earlier? Well, here's the evidence. Visible threats to the underwater marine habitat.
And what happens when the silt and sediment comes through is that most of the plants and animals here depend on clear water for their survival. So when you come in here and something that's accustomed to getting good clean sun like a tree, it needs to have that solar energy come through for it to photosynthesize and produce energy. And all of a sudden it comes in and it's all smogged up. You aren't really living your best life. Combine that with the heat we've been having in recent months, it's giving it like a fever.
And the evidence is pretty clear. The sediments from the nearby excavation seeping into waters around the mangroves. The answer, a silk curtain to reduce this kind of damage.
Neighboring our parks, we may not have much control over, but we want to have more stringent rules for what takes place in the park. And we want to continue to advocate for the government. And hopefully the government will work with us in the longer term so that we have these buffer zones around sensitive areas. Because it's an area like this that, like I say, brings a lot of food to the Bahamian table. Do we really want to cut that off for something that is taking place for a few months out of the year? We want to be respectful for our environment.
When people come to these parks, they see the mangroves, they see the water. But do you think people really have a full appreciation for what happens here and how this affects their table, as you put it?
No, not really. I've been working at the organization for about 14 years now. And when we first started coming out to Bonefish Pond, we had heaps of trash, 7-8 foot tall. We've removed 30-40 tons of trash over the last 12 years. There were times when we thought most of the major trash was gone and we were out snorkeling, counting fish, and came across a kitchen sink. Like, there's no way this kitchen sink could have gotten there unintentionally. So somebody had to swim all across all the creek, up the channel, to put a kitchen sink there. And so it, it really reiterates how no matter how far you feel from nature, from the urban sprawl, it's right there. Every time you look underwater, there's money, there's bottles, there's bottle caps. It reiterates how destructive we can be.
And people intentionally come into these parks to dock?
Less now than it was before, but previously when we first had the park fully operational, you'd come in over Christmas holidays when we would, be with our families and not actively engaging in enforcement patrols at the time, and especially at the time we would take from Christmas Eve to New Year's off. And you'd go home for the Christmas break, and when you come back, there's someone in the middle of the road, and it's just like, it's really like $5, $10 to go to the dump to drop this off. Why are you driving all the way out here to put it down? But there is, for many years ago, we had a campaign called Wetlands and Not Wastelands. And it's still, no matter what, a lot of people still view mangroves as the swamp, where the mosquitoes eat you alive, and that's about it.
It was now time for a closer look at the mangroves from underneath. We suited up, snorkeling gear on, and got underway. As we moved through Down Under, we were able to identify many of the different species calling these mangroves home. In some cases, it took a minute for the fish to warm up to us, if at all, but this experience ignited a whole new level of curiosity.
Well, thanks for the amazing snorkel, by the way, and experience, but one of the things we found, right back in the mangrove is fishing line. And what does this tell you the minute you see this?
Well, people are here fishing.
Wow.
And it's a issue that we have, a challenge that we have on the site, where people historically have been using the site for fishing, but they would have been controlled in certain areas. And then when we put the boardwalk in, they now have access to new areas to fish. So we have studies that show that 20 years ago, when we first assessed the fish population was at a certain level. And then when we put the boardwalk in, it dropped. And then it's slowly coming back up.
What are the inherent dangers, though, of fishing in an area like this? You now change the ecosystem, I guess.
Sharks wouldn't generally come in too much into the area, but if there's a distressed fish, the shark will take the opportunity and come seeking for it.
Distress meaning being fished?
Yeah. Well, being pulled as you're trying to run away.
Sure.
And sharks, barracudas are opportunistic animals. So they'll come in, take out the weaker animals in the system. So you have the risk of a shark coming in and crossing paths with people, particularly children, and it creates an environment that is slightly less safe for our visitors.
The seagrass beds are often close to popular swimming beaches, which are, believe it or not, good hunting grounds for hungry sharks.
So when you put us together, they're home. We're just visiting their home. And so sometimes you just happen to be around when they're hunting. Other times they're doing the hunting's further away from us. So, the behavior of shark is complicated. They're very complex creatures. But some of the other beaches that we have are almost immediately right next to a fish processing place.
And that's where it gets complicated.
When I think of Montague, for sure, it's immediately there. So, a shark is a creature that swims hundreds of miles in a day, in a month, when it's moving around. So 100 yards apart is not really any distance for the life of that shark.
And I was told even though you don't see them...
Oh, sharks everywhere, no matter what.
Although Hollywood has created these menacing images of man-eating sharks looking to prey on unsuspecting swimmers, Knowles tells a little different story.
And it's unfortunate when people are attacked by sharks, but almost 100% of the chance it's not a malicious intent of the shark. It just is opportunistic at the time. Something was going on, it popped in, and unfortunately a curious shark has the disadvantage of not having hands, so the only way for it to test what something is to bite. But razor sharp teeth kind of really damages you up really good.
All summer long, marine scientists were warning of the bleaching coral from rising water temperatures. We saw the evidence ourselves while snorkeling at Bonefish Pond.
All of a sudden, the animals which are accustomed to, 85, 86 degree temperatures now like, no, it's 101 degrees.
The coral are now thrust into survival mode.
And so what they do is when they're stressed, corals themselves they feed themselves, like they can produce food through a partnership with the zooxanthellae, dinoflagellistic organism that provides food in exchange for shelter, as well as they put out the tentacles and extract food from in the water. But if you feeling you can't feed yourself, why are you feeding something else? So you kick out anything that requires energy demand from you. So you basically, I'm going to go to the bare minimal state to survive. And what happens when they kick out the zooxanthellae, that's where their color goes. So they go to this vibrant white color.
The white color, a clear indication that they are in distress. Prolonged hot water could be fatal. A dead coral reef means an ecosystem headed for life support. With 9 months on the job, Bahamas National Trust Executive Director Lakeisha Anderson-Roll has been busy trying to raise more awareness about the many parks around the country that so many of us are unaware of.
They don't know that some of these protected areas exist. They don't know that we have national parks on these particular islands. They don't know that they are protected by law. A lot of times, they assume if they are familiar, there are green spaces. As an example, the retreat gardens. People come here to visit, to participate and experience the festivals, but they don't understand that it's not just a venue for events, it's actually a protected area. And so we are still working towards increasing and raising awareness of the value of the national parks and how they benefit the communities and they benefit us as a people. So it's going to take us quite a bit some work, but we are committed to doing it.
The newly formed communications unit will help to spread the word and bring more visitors and protectors to these parks and the experiences they provide. And while she and her team are working to bring awareness to the BNT, its parks and protection work, the issues of climate change and invasive species are threatening the very existence of the ecosystems that they're trying to protect.
Some of the greatest threats that I would say also includes invasive alien species. They can be plants like the invasive casuarinas that you would usually see along the coastline and other plants, and also animals. We do have quite a number of issues in some of our national parks where they are impacting native wildlife. Like the Abaco parrot, we have issues with feral cats, wild cats that are targeting the nesting areas. We also have threats as it relates to climate change. We would have already seen this particular summer, there's been a record heat index where, if you were able to go out for a dive, the corals are bleached. And it doesn't mean that they are dead, but it does mean that they are really stressed, and if it's prolonged and coupled with other dangers or threats, then they do have the potential to die, which can cause a mass bleaching and die-off event. And we need to understand that it's really important for us to be able to protect the corals and take care of them. And so when they are in a stressed environment and you're out snorkeling or diving, we want to make sure that you don't get too fancy and start touching the corals because you're adding on to already a stressed environment. Managing threats is one of the ways that we actually manage protected areas. And it comes down to making sure we work closely with the resource users. We work closely with the scientists, working closely with our team who are in the field looking and monitoring the water temperatures to be able to provide more sound advice on how we manage in the long term.
So whether it's conservation, preservation, adventure, or simply a quiet green space, remember, your national parks belong to you. So let's treat them with respect and support the work they do and those who make it happen.